We are going to transition and go into our panel discussion for this portion of today's summit session. So I welcome again everyone back from your break. We will begin our panel discussion, and I pass the baton over to Priya Shaplot to monitor our conversation today. Priya?
Great, thank you so much. So much to think about. I want to partially pause and reflect on what Dr. Jack has shared with us, but I'm also very eager to share the 4 panelists we have that are going to talk about some of the same issues and considerations from the viewpoint of practitioners and those who work with practitioners. So I'm going to just take a quick moment and just say that I'm so honored to moderate a discussion that features 3 practitioners from fellow colleges in Michigan, and also an individual who is working with many of you, or all of you in this work. So as you can see the panelists on the screen, would each of you mind taking a minute and just sharing your name, your institution, and the nature of the work? Not necessarily your title, but just maybe a one run-on sentence on the work that you do at your institution. Sue, maybe we can start with you and then go to Louis and Nathan and then Precious.
Hi everybody, my name is Sue Boyd and I work at Macomb Community College. As the Dean of Students there, one of my responsibilities and why I'm so interested in this topic is our office, the Student Options for Success, where we're dealing with students with a lot of what Dr. Jack talked about today. So this is an area of high interest for me. Good to see you all. Thank you for having me.
I'm Nathan
Good afternoon, everyone. Thomas, Kalamazoo Valley Community College, Director of KVAP, Kalamazoo Valley Accelerated Associate Program. And our program works with low-income students to increase graduation rates and also to decrease time to degree completion. Thanks for having me.
Thanks, Louis. Nathan?
Sorry, Louis. I'm Nathan Vensky. I'm the Associate Dean of Student Services at Jackson College. And my role really just focusing on a lot of what other people have said, just looking at student supports and removing barriers at any way we can. Focused primarily over the last 5 years on really developing a holistic advising system to support the unique whole student, as we say. So I'm very happy to be here as well.
Great. And Precious?
Yes, my name's Precious Miller. I have the pleasure and opportunity of supporting the work that community colleges are doing in regards to student success, that be increasing accessibility to community-based organizations and resources that would be helpful for students meeting their basic needs.
Thank you all. And just as a quick introduction, my name is Priya. I work with the National Center for Inquiry and Improvement as the Vice President of Strategy. And I have been very honored and grateful to work with Michigan for the last few years on structuring support around students' basic needs and financial stability. And so there's this kind of nice mix between what Dr. Jack is talking about, ensuring that students have what they need, and also ensuring that it's not by luck and that it is by design and by structure, that students are in the right place at the right time with the right supports to get what they need in order to not just live, but to thrive. And so staying on the theme of Dr. Jack's keynote on hidden obstacles, and also circling back to the first question we had in the town hall from Cindy Edwards, who asked about the impacts of COVID on students broadly and lower income students specifically. Maybe we can start the first broad question to reflect on what is a hidden for students that has been revealed or made more clear over the last few months as we are in the throes of multiple pandemics, whether it's public health and COVID, whether it's racism, racial unrest, whether it's the complete disruption of family life and work. So maybe Sue, we can start with you if you wouldn't mind sharing a top of mind hidden obstacle in.
Helps if I unmute first, right? I think what I would like to talk about is the internet piece. Dr. Jack kind of hit on it. You know, what we're finding is that some students have internet access, but it might only be on their smartphone. or the bandwidth isn't enough to turn your video on when you're in a Zoom meeting or a Teams meeting. And so that whole piece of technology related to the internet, I think is really huge right now. I think it can create some barriers, and then you hear different sides. You know, some people are frustrated that students aren't turning their video on. Well, there might be a darn good reason for it. They might not have the bandwidth to support it, so they can either see it and hear it, but they can't do both because of the internet access. Some of them, I think, will also not turn their cameras on because they don't want to let us in to what their home life looks like. You know, even myself, you know, I'm more comfortable in a Teams meeting. Then I know more about that than Zoom. I was trying to change my background to put my Macomb background on so you can't see my den. And, you know, and you're my colleagues. You know, it just seemed like that was the thing to do. So I think students choose to turn their cameras off for a variety of reasons, including internet issues. And I'm just going to make that a big umbrella. You know, some of us know that you can't do the things on your phone as you can on your computer. So if their smartphone is their only computer, that can present some challenges. So.
And to return the favor, I couldn't find the unmute button, Sue. And Sue, I think what you're talking about, internet access specifically and technology broadly, the idea of like hardware and software and making sure you have the appropriate basics to be able to function in remote learning is really, really critical. So thank you so much. Louis, we'd love to hear a little bit from you.
Sure. So, you know, as you all know, I think the pandemic has only pronounced a lot of these barriers for low-income students. But when I think about it, one thing kind of comes to the forefront of my mind when thinking about our KVAP students, and that is engagement. You know, I strongly subscribe to the theory of involvement. I believe that students that are engaged on campus tend to perform better. So that was one of the premise of our program. We wanted to get students involved. And in order to do that, we wanted to foster a sense of belonging on our campus. We wanted our students to feel accepted, respected, supported, and valued. And I think we did an excellent job of doing that. However, once the pandemic hit, we moved to remote instruction. You know, the connection faded fairly fast. One of the things that we did when we were on campus, we had bi-weekly seminars. We also had mandatory meetings with counselors. And those things were continued online, but we just didn't see the attendance. It was a sharp decline in attendance. But as we talk more and more as a staff, one of the things that we realize is that in addition to those times that we set aside to connect with students, the drop-ins was probably even more significant. You know, when we think about drop-ins, we have so many students who are just not, they don't do commitment. So we would have students that would miss advisor appointments or counselor appointments, but they would pop in the office all the time. Some students will come in to vent. Some students will come in just kind of take a load off in between classes. Some students will come in to share stories. Some students will come in to get encouragement, affirmation, you name it. You know, our office was buzzing with student activity. And that was also a time where we can encourage students or remind them about the seminars or about their counselor appointments. So all of that is gone now, being remote. And I think one thing that I thought about is that for some students, they don't have that same type of support in their homes. Sometimes the support may be there, but if it's a first generation student, maybe that family cannot speak to some of the challenges that the student is facing. So it's a little bit different. And then, you know, we also have some students who may not be first generation, but they just prefer to share that with someone on campus. I think about my own children. I have a daughter in college and a daughter in high school. And I know they talk about college, but they never ask me for advice. If I offer that, it's quickly dismissed, usually with a snarky comment. So, you know, some students have their place. A lot of times it's at their institution, and that's gone now. So that's something that I worry about and have a cause for concern about, and that's something that we're focusing on. How can we continue to keep students engaged?
I think one thing when we were doing our call in preparation for this discussion that you mentioned was about how to really preserve the human connection. And that is something that our students specifically need. That's something that I think each of us during this kind of surreal experience need. But I think what you're talking about, this sense of engagement and connection and belonging, is in a way even more basic than some of the needs that we talk about broadly. Nathan.
Yeah, I guess that's a perfect segue to what's front of mind. And I know when we all talked about this, things Lewis and I were talking about, they merged a little bit together. And that is really just how our students are dealing with this on an emotional state or a mental health state. I think it was Priya or Lewis that said, even though we should be physically distancing, not socially distancing. So it's during this time that missing out on the social interaction, and it could be as easy as what Lewis said, where you just drop into a place, and my joke is to grab a snack, because those who knows me, I just walk around our campus all day long eating from different departments. But it's a way that I communicate too. You go there and you talk to other people and you have that social interaction. And so being a maniac as I am running around, I can just only get, when we get feedback from students on our satisfaction surveys, that they're just struggling with being online. And it's not the content, and they usually say it's not the content, it's just the balancing of things, the just ambiguity of it all. And it's just, what we're finding is that even if students were historically successful in classes, it doesn't mean, come here, Charlie, since you're gonna yell. So it's this type of thing. So when you're sitting up on your stair, you have this popping in all day. And this is kind of what we deal with. So this is a perfect example of what our students are dealing with, is how do you balance that and then know, hey, I'm at work, and then you have your kids running around, or you have other responsibilities. So that's really what was front of mind for me when we look at what's going on. The other quick part is kind of what Dr. Jack talked about too, where it's not burdening to ask these questions, it's my job. We really need to do a good job of training our frontline staff and our people dealing with students on the frontline level to really be conscious of the way that they're interacting with people. And we talk about meeting people where they're at, but that's really setting the tone in a conversation. And how do you really have those conversations with people who may be different than you, and have that relationship building conversation, and realize it's not going to be the first, second, third meeting. It may take a year to develop the trust between someone that you don't readily identify with, right? And so it's on us as institutions. So this is on us, and then to train our people to be prepared to have those conversations and to be the welcoming environment.
Thank you so much, Nathan. I think if I interpret the variety of issues that you're raising, it's about kind of rehumanizing students and not compartmentalizing them in the context of our institution, but really recognizing that our institution is a portion of their context. And how can we really kind of respond to that whole student? And to that, I'd like to invite Precious to share a little bit about kind of your perspective, Precious, having worked with colleges with such variety.
Yeah, a hidden obstacle for that I've seen uncovered would definitely be the mental well-being of faculty and institutional personnel that students are interfacing with. Nathan touched on, the mental health needs of students, and I think it's important for us to also consider the mental well-being of faculty, staff, and administrators at our institutions. We're asking students to be brave in communicating their needs, but they're asking these of individuals who are also, learning, relearning, and in some cases unlearning matters relating to technology, racial bias, and other present issues that students may present to them. And, perhaps even learning that these student needs have even existed in the first place. That there are community-based resources available to students, and where those resources are even located is another area that some individuals at institutions might be learning or understanding for the first time. Brene Brown is someone that I really appreciate about her work about vulnerability. And she shares a quote that basically talks about educators being the ones who are creating safe spaces for students to learn. But in the new world that we're in, it's not just about a safe space to learn, it's about a safe place to ask questions and to be brave and to breathe and to just be and explore things that are beyond the classroom, that are beyond the academics. And so some institutional personnel may be accustomed to creating an emotional space for students, but it's going beyond that now, in my opinion. And these are things that I think have been uncovered by the pandemic.
Thank you so much, Precious. I'd like to kind of open it to all four of you to talk a little bit more about, in light of the variety of obstacles that are being less hidden or more pronounced or just clearer, how are you and your colleagues responding to these? I know there's a variety of work that you're doing, but if you could highlight one or two aspects of the work that you're doing that is trying to address these needs and hopefully be sustained in a post-pandemic or post-pandemic's life, what would that look like?
I guess I can start. So this is front of mind because of just kind of what I shared. That was a big thing to address, was again just dealing with people again from different backgrounds and being able and being prepared and trained to do so. So CJ's here, Lewis is here. I just recently asked him to. I'm trying to get him involved too. But CJ Mathis, he agreed to be on a panel that I'm going to have with different professionals and probably incorporating some students too. Of people from different backgrounds and different places where they work as well, of how you deal with people, how you really disarm people in that first interaction, how you can begin building rapport with people who are different than you, and just looking for themes in that, and then skills and traits that people talk about. And I think Dr. Jack again used that same quote again, is just expressing to people that this is really your job and this is really what you're here for, and it's not a burden to ask. But obviously then your behavior has to reflect that. I mean, anyone can say that it's my job to help you, but if you're a curmudgeon and you hate your job, that's going to come off more than any of the words that you can say. So it's just training people to be there for their students and how we can best interact with others. And that's one thing we're doing to try to address that, at least for the advising staff. We'll see how it goes. So if it doesn't go great, right, then we can see what happens. But then just to give the entire frontline staff and student services staff some skills to help serve our students better.
Thank you so much for sharing that, Nathan. Others, Lewis, would you like to talk a little bit more about the KVAP program? I don't know how you pronounce that.
Yeah, KVAP.
KVAP.
So one of the things that we're doing in KVAP, and also our colleagues, at KVCC in general, we're really taking advantage of drop-ins, right? So there's drop-in advising. We're seeing some really good results from that, where students, again, necessarily don't have to make the commitment, but you can drop in and ask questions, get some assistance, and hop back off at your leisure. But also we're starting to see this from, our student clubs. They're offering some meetings via Zoom. Also tutoring is available. So the drop-in is working really well. And even in our office, not just drop-in advising, but just drop-in period. So our administrative assistant has times where she's available, and anybody in KVAP program can just stop by to say hello and kind of shoot the breeze. We're also doing some things with Canvas where we're initiating some conversations online to just kind of have some fun and again create that sense of belonging amongst our students. So those are some things that we're working on. And I will say on the faculty side, our faculty are doing a really good job. First of all, some are changing to synchronous remote classes so that they can have that in-class feel for students. Some of our faculty have even stepped up to say, I'll come on campus to teach some classes. And I think that's just as important as well. We talk about meeting students where they are. We have a lot of students, especially low-income students, who are just not as comfortable with technology. But I think, being available to those students on campus gives us space and opportunity to kind of help them develop those skills. So that's something that I'm really proud of. and just the innovation that I'm seeing across the board at KVCC. We're trying to be really responsive to the students. I know surveys are being administered as well to kind of see how we can engage better with our students.
Sue, would you like to add a little bit from Macomb's perspective?
Well, in the theme of what I identified, you know, I think for what I think is working at Macomb is an awareness factor. You know, I've had a couple of conversations with instructors, you know, where I'm talking out why a student might not turn on their video, for example. And the most recent one, the comment was, wow, I never thought of that. Never occurred to me that they might not want to share what's behind them, if you will. And it was a aha moment for me, because it seems second nature that you would think that, but for others it's not. And so it's an awareness, you know, talking about it, so that maybe on the first day of class, you know, if there's synchronous instruction, that the instructor can say, you know, these are ways that you can, you know, hide your background, if you will, put a different background up. And so it's almost like part of the syllabus explanation as to some options there, to give students another option. Also with the internet, to explain that sometimes when you turn off your video, your connection, especially if you don't have bandwidth, you know, that allows you to at least hear and communicate and participate that way. You might not be able to see me, you know. So again, just talking about that, you know, and in connection to all of this, I was in a meeting earlier today at Macomb, and we were talking about bombings, you know, and how to help faculty understand what's happening and how that can occur. So there's this whole learning curve, you know, that's out there that what people just don't know about, and until you're exposed to it, it doesn't. Who ever heard of Zoom bombing, for heaven's sake, you know, prior to all of this? And we've had some interesting bombs, if you will, and we're learning that there's actually simple ways to prevent that. And so getting the word out and explaining to that, because it's important to communicate and let them know what are some other options. Really, it is a learning curve, is what it feels like. And helping people get through that, I think, is important, and it's been helpful, at least in the little bit that I'm learning and trying to share, and what we're being exposed to.
Thank you so much, Sue. And something that Precious and I were talking about in advance of this call was also that the pandemic has offered so much that we were not interested in, but it's also offered us an opportunity to make real the things we said would never happen, the things that were so going to be so impossible. And Precious and I were reflecting on the idea that there's much to celebrate in what colleges, not just like the three college practitioners that we have on the panel are sharing, but also that many of you in the comments and the chat that I can see are already doing. So to that, Precious, would you like to add anything else about kind of celebrating wins and even recognizing where colleges are making progress and kind of building on that?
Yeah, so I've had the pleasure of hearing some very innovative ideas from colleges that have come about as a result of the pandemic. So transportation is something that is not unfamiliar to some of us regarding students getting to campus, but because of the pandemic, it's creating even more of a barrier. Some buses may or may not be running for students. And so if there's a lack of transportation for some students, there has been the innovative idea of partnering with churches who are making food pantries mobile for students. And I thought that was the most creative idea. It's something I wouldn't have necessarily thought about on my own. And so I just feel like the pandemic has definitely brought about some new challenges, but has also sprung up some very great opportunities for us to get really creative regarding how we're able to support students. My colleagues and I have talked about, you know, our values and what is driving our work, and innovation is one of our values. Collaboration is something that we also highlight and offer our colleges to share with one another. And so being able to share creative ideas like that is something else that we've seen, and it's been really great to see.
I'm also encouraged by the fact that sometimes, you know, at least historically, we hear, you know, we can't do that because of this, or we can't do this because of that. I think we all saw that some of that was bullshit when this came and you had to make those adjustments on the fly. And it's all of a sudden now we can get this done in 2 weeks. Like, it's just absolutely bananas. And so I think as we leave through this, I think it'll be pretty fantastic to show what we can accomplish when it is serious enough, and that some of these things that were barriers
I'm in
were
another
more or less
meeting,
arbitrary,
but
or just maybe a preference.
my video
Well,
is
I'm
not
excited
on.
about that more than anything, and what will stay. I saw that in the comment, what will or will not stay. But I feel as though, at least at our institution, we move forward in 5 months what would have taken us 5 years to get taken care of, at least from a technology standpoint. I think it's also great to give kudos to the people who have been working very hard, our faculty who have been able to pivot, who didn't want to teach online, who are doing, you know, anything they can to help students be successful, and collaboration, at least with us, has been great. So that's been pretty good to see.
That's really great to hear, Nathan and Precious. It's almost saying things didn't have to be this way and things don't have to be this way, especially as we continue to better understand what our students at our institutions need. We have a few minutes. Precious, do we have time to take a couple of questions from the chat?
Yes, we do.
Oh, excellent. I'd like to start with Fazia. I hope I'm pronouncing your name. Feel free to correct me. Fazia, a few minutes ago, so if you scroll back up, wrote, "We discussed the impact faculty has or can have on student success, but colleges are hiring more and more adjunct faculty who are not as vested because they're juggling multiple jobs themselves. How do we break this pattern?" So would like any of you want to speak about that?
Priya, can you say that again? I'm sorry, I was reading the chats as you were saying that. I apologize.
Oh, sure. And I'll also post it on the bottom so everybody has it. How can institutions accept more responsibility? Oh, I'm so sorry. Am I reading a different one altogether? I got very excited. Fazia was basically talking about how there are an increasing number of adjunct faculty members that are involved, and they themselves, because they might be teaching at other institutions, don't necessarily have, or they might not feel connected and valued the same way our students might to the institution. So how can we break the pattern of them feeling disconnected from the institution when they are the faculty members for students?
This is just an idea that's coming top of mind, is perhaps thinking about how institutions can make you know, the integration of adjunct faculty, create a culture of inclusivity, and how, you know, we're all in this together. Like during orientation, how can we make sure that this person feels included and a part of the story and the things that are happening at our institution? And then if, you know, they're strapped for time and maybe not able to unpack some of these ideas, maybe they could be joined with someone else at the institution who has a really good handle on what's available to them, and then join them, you know, within the lecture, or join them when they're having office hours. Like, what kind of partnerships could be created to help this person who might feel disconnected then feel connected?
Thank you so much, Precious. Another question that came from Kayla, and feel free to unmute yourself if you'd like to add a little bit more context to your question. Kayla would like to hear a little bit more about how others are disarming students in a virtual environment when appointment at the moment right now feels so transactional, and I'm assuming the campus feels so disconnected. Kayla, if you'd like to add a little bit more, you're welcome to unmute yourself and do so. But how do we kind of rekindle that connection in a virtual space?
I am. Fine.
Hello.
Okay. I guess one thing that we've seen is similar to what's been going on in the chat too. It does seem as though the show rates are enhanced, obviously, for that need for interaction. The Zoom appointments have been, or whatever video platform you have, has been great. But I still, in the responses from our survey, again, that's all I can go off of, is what the students are saying, is that they're still not feeling connected. So even though we're doing what we can to feel connection, there isn't a supplement for having face-to-face interaction. So even though we can try to supplement it, it's still always going to fall short from what we're seeing. So as much as we can recreate those personal interactions, I think what that goes to is what someone said up there about your advising models. It is about just consistent outreach, and I think someone will outreach 3 times. So just continuously outreaching to make sure your students are, you know, have what they need. And if that's just someone to talk to direct to additional resources, then that could be it. But I think that's what we've seen at our institution. That doesn't mean that's what's happening at yours, but it's really just a need for personal interaction has been the primary thing. And the way that we're trying to do that is just our model has been just consistent outreach and just making sure that we do that. So that's kind of a continuation of what we've done.
I appreciate that, Nathan, because I think one of the threads that you're talking about is how to still instill some level of predictability for students. So even if it isn't perfect in what we may have wanted to do in person, how can we at least ensure that students know that we notice them and we have structures that allow us to maintain some form of connection? I'd love to open that question to others in the spirit of communal exchange. What have you done at your institutions to build some kind of meaningful connection in a virtual space right now when in-person is less likely? Feel free to unmute yourself. There are a couple of comments in the chat that I'm also trying to keep a track of. But if anybody'd like to share, how are you humanizing connections virtually?
Well,
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry, that was a crazy thing to ask. Unmute yourself at the same time.
Sandy Young from Lansing Community College in Michigan. We are, one of the things we're doing from a career services perspective is a series of sessions with employers. So they're kind of like chat, career opportunities, job search, learning about the company, different opportunities kind of thing. And I think that's going to be good as far as that connection with employers, because so much of that has been lost with COVID and people think, oh, there aren't any jobs, it's hopeless, blah, blah, blah. But you can still network virtually and have this more of an informal chat discussion with employers. So that's one of the things that we're doing that I like.
Thank you for sharing that, Sandy.
Thank you.
Sounds great. Was there another unmuter?
Yeah, that was me, Priya. I was just going to add that at KVCC, you know, again, I mentioned some student life clubs having meetings via Zoom, but we also have some activities that are taking place here. Today, we streamed Constitution Day. There's a virtual skills expo coming up next month. And then we've in the past had some virtual art exhibits. So again, trying to find some creative ways to stay connected to students. One of the things that we're doing out of my office, you know, as time permits, we're trying to reach out to some students personally as well. So we use the Google app, and sometimes it's just maybe a text to students because, you know, that's the form that they communicate in the most, just to see how students are doing. And again, we're getting some pretty good response rates from that. And you know, there have also been times where we've picked up the phone just to hear a student's voice and just kind of have a casual conversation. So again, that goes a long way with keeping students engaged and connected to the campus.
Thanks, Louis. And in the chat, there are a couple of great examples from Jennifer and Sheila. Jennifer, do you want to maybe share a little bit about these Welcome Wednesdays? How do they work in the summer? And did you have some version of that moving forward into the fall term?
Yes, this was the brainchild of my amazing boss, Sally Smarsky, who started a whole social media push over the summer for our incoming students who would be new in the fall and for students who were returning as well. So we went live on Wednesdays. We showed them every building on campus that on the outside, we weren't allowed to go in. We introduced them to all their success coaches, their advisors, some faculty, and we also did success workshops every Wednesday at 1. Wednesday workshops at 1 to give them some of those skills that would help them when the semester began. It overlapped into our virtual/hybrid welcome week activities, which also continued what we had been doing all summer on Wednesdays to welcome them to campus, meet faculty, meet coaches. We had large blow-up movie screens, safe distant movies outside behind our dorms. We had contests, and so I really felt like all of those efforts helped them feel a little bit more connected and a part of something at our community college, even though most of it was virtual.
sounds like a fun time.
It was awesome. We had a great time. Yep.
Oh, the days of summer, even on Zoom. There was Christina, would you, oh, hold on a second. Sheila, you were talking about peer outreach, which really syncs well about students connecting with students. Do you want to talk a little bit about what you're thinking of doing in this program?
Sure, it's kind of a bookend of my day. We were in a meeting earlier. I don't know if anyone, there's 200 people I see on this call. I don't know if anyone from our group is here too, but from JRCC. No, we just, like everyone, are just trying to find ways to reach out to students, especially as many of them navigate synchronous or asynchronous, courses for the first time. And we had a great response with a faculty and staff campaign over the summer to call students, and we just thought it might be a great way for students to talk to each other. And so we're looking at ways to start that within the next few weeks to help, check in midway through this term and then continue that through the winter. Happy to talk about it some more, but it's such a new idea that's really, we're going to try using texting and, just the things that we've all known that students respond to, and hoping that the students who are we're going to call them Raider guides, where the JRCC Raiders. So, we're hoping that, the students could do the outreach, and we'll have many, folks supporting them with that, but that they could have their own sort of drop-in hours for things that they may not need to talk to their faculty members about, but just, students, learning from each other and helping them out. Thanks.
That sounds great. Thank you so much. There are a few other bits in there in the chat with different suggestions that each of you have. I don't want to necessarily call on every single person, but if there's someone that feels excited about the work that they're doing and would like to share, I'm going to go ahead and say it again. Go ahead and unmute yourself.
Shamelessly throw out that this is Lori Huber with Oakland Community College. We had a little over 65 different live sessions that included Facebook Live. I mentioned in the chat the wide range of folks that were engaged, as well as creating webinars that people can go back to that include transfer and so on. But I think, like all of you, we were trying to pivot really fast. Back in April, we actually had a test virtual live admission set up in West Bloomfield area, and little did we know that we'd be doing that 100% of the time. But I think we've needed to revamp that and engage our student recruiters. We've got a student recruiter program that's in its 3rd year now, and trying to grow that and kind of evolve it into a peer mentoring experience. What that looks like, I've learned quite a bit from Dr. Jack today, what that looks like, and targeting some of these more needy populations is what we're kind of trying to get our arms around. It's harder than it's easier to say than it is to identify these students.
What I'm really heartened by, I think what we're all heartened by, is to see the variety of experiments and innovations that are being tried out in this space, and to learn from one another in doing this. I'm going to go ahead and turn it back to Precious, unless any of our panelists, do you have any last thoughts based on your experiences, last insights? Sue, Lewis, Precious, Nathan? For now, more to follow. Precious, back to you.
Great. Thank you so much, Priya, for being our moderator today. I just wanted to invite everyone to join us for tomorrow's session, Real Values in a Virtual World. It is sure to be a great way to end the week, as well as continuing this conversation on Twitter. If you are interested in a happy hour, we welcome you to join us tomorrow for tomorrow's conversation, as it will not end after tomorrow's session. It will be continued on Twitter. And so we've gotten some really great feedback with our Twitter conversation, and have been loving this time with you all today. I want to thank every single one of you for your time and investment to student success, and thank you for sharing sharing the virtual space with us today. Hope you have a great afternoon, and I will see you in the next virtual space. Bye-bye.
Thank you all.